You remember her face, not because it was soft, but because it never turned toward you fully. A face lit only from the side, half offered, half absent, like a moon that kept its secrets pressed to the dark. And still, you circled her gravity like a starving dog waiting for a thrown bone that never came. You told yourself she was mystery, but it was your humiliation that made her divine. She stayed, not because you worshipped her, but because you did not bend. The others sang, wept, wrote her names in poems. You stayed silent, and she heard that silence louder than any vow. You, the question she could not answer. You, the wall she could not climb. That was power, not what you gave her, but what you refused. She stayed not for love, but for the wound you wouldn't touch. And that's what no one tells you. She doesn't want to be seen. She wants to be denied until she breaks. And in that breaking, she believes she is real. She doesn't love you because you see her. She loves you because you don't. You are not the one who touched her hair gently, who whispered promises beneath lantern skies, who folded her name into little kindnesses. That was another man, one she bled dry, then buried in silence. She does not return to the arms that cradle her. She returns to the hand that withholds. The cold glance, the unfinished sentence, the man who refuses to complete the illusion. You were not made to worship her softness. You were made to expose the jagged symmetry beneath it. You do not mirror her fantasy, and that is why she stays. You walk beside her, but you do not reach for her hand, and this burns her more deeply than cruelty. For every woman carries within her a mirror, but only the ones who are broken know the terror of not being seen, not misunderstood, not discarded, but left entirely intact. You leave her intact. That is your sin. That is your seduction. You will not fall. You will not soften. You will not break yourself to fit the shape of her longing. And in that defiance, she feels the edge of something older than safety, older than comfort, something primitive and ruthless, something holy. She watches you speak with others, untouched by the need to be adored. She watches how your gaze lands on her with the same neutrality it grants to the world, not dismissal, not cruelty, but a sacred lack of hunger. You are not reaching, and in a world of grasping hands, she mistakes your detachment for divinity, and perhaps it is. You do not believe in her beauty, not as they do. You do not raise it like an altar and kneel before it. You see it for what it is, a costume, exquisitely woven, but a costume still. And that is what she cannot forgive. That is why she returns. You are the one who sees the veil, not the goddess. And yet you do not tear it down. You leave her untouched and untouched. She begins to unravel. She will try to seduce you with pain. She will confess false secrets, hoping to bait your pity, but you will not enter the ritual of her shame. You see it and you walk past it, not out of cruelty, but because you no longer offer your blood to ghosts. You are not her savior. You are her mirror, and this mirror refuses to flatter. You do not reflect what she wants to see. You reflect the void where her meaning collapses. You reflect the man who did not kneel, and this image, this lack, becomes her obsession. For a woman is not bound by love. She is bound by the one man who does not become her reflection, the one who survives her theater without playing a part. You are not cold, but you are beyond her climate, and she, shivering in the frost of your indifference, begins to imagine warmth where there is only wind. She gives you the lines she wishes you would say. She hears devotion in your silences. She mistakes the absence of flattery for the presence of fate. And in this storm of projection, you become holy to her. But you are not holy. You are simply not afraid. Not afraid to lose her, not afraid to stand still while she spins, not afraid to see her as she is mask, blood, longing, rot, and still not bend. The others bowed. You did not, and that, to her, means something must be buried in you, something more powerful than adoration, something she can't name. She will accuse you of being unavailable, emotionally frozen, unloving, but the truth is more brutal. You see her clearly, and it is this clarity she cannot escape. You see the child in her, still throwing tantrums for attention. You see the queen, desperate to be dethroned. You see the liar pretending to be victim, and the victim pretending to be saint. You see the whole play, and you refuse the ticket. She is not used to this. She is used to being the mirror, used to reflecting what others want, until she forgets what face she once had. But you reverse the alchemy. You do not enter her mirror. You hold one of your own, and it does not flatter. It reveals. And that revelation is unbearable, so she hates you and loves you and hates you again. Because in your eyes she sees something terrifying, her own face, stripped of myth, her own soul, naked in the absence of performance. You do not call her beautiful, you call her bluff. And it is in this moment, this cruel and holy moment, that her loyalty is sealed. Not to you, but to the place inside her that still believes she must earn you. And that is the secret. She does not stay because you give her peace. She stays because you awaken the war, the inner war, the one no man dared to let live. She stays because your silence burns deeper than false intimacy. She stays because your absence is more present than their affection. She stays because you are the mirror that never reflects her fantasy, only her face. And somewhere, deep in the primal soil of her being, she believes that if she can make you break, then she will finally be real. But you do not break. You remain untouched, unyielding, unmirrored. And in your refusal, you awaken her original wound that no gaze will ever complete her. No man will ever crown her queen without first demanding her crown in blood. You are not cruel. You are simply the one who did not pretend. And in this refusal to play God, she gives you the loyalty reserved for gods. You never asked for it, but you wear it like a curse anyway. She kneels to the one who will not kneel because she believes only the God who resists her can redeem her. You do not reach for the crown she offers, and still, she builds you a temple, brick by brick, scar by scar. She calls you cruel, but continues to kneel. She calls you distant, but offers up her softness like a sacrament, not because you asked, but because you didn't. Because you stood unmoved while she danced the rituals. Because you refused to validate the performance she calls love. Because you refused to be conquered. And in that refusal, she found something holier than affection. She found a cliff she could throw herself from. There is no ecstasy in being loved easily, no transcendence in being held without resistance. She does not want worship, she wants tension, the ache, the refusal, the ache again. You are not the man who opens his arms. You are the altar that demands blood. And she, with trembling hands, lays herself down in the hope that your silence might finally break into tenderness. But it doesn't. It never does. She wants you because you won't need her. She dresses herself in pain and prays it's enough. She believes love is earned through suffering, that salvation comes only when the God finally relents. But your eyes stay the same. Your voice does not soften. You let her offer everything and give nothing in return. Not because you are hollow, but because you know what she cannot admit, that love freely given means nothing to those who beg for approval. So she gives more. She weeps on the floor. She sends messages at midnight, She carves her skin with apologies you never demanded, and still you do not move. You are the priest who refuses to forgive. You are the God who refuses to descend. And she mistakes this for strength because strength is the only language she trusts. She has no reverence for kindness, no loyalty to softness. She fears the man who loves too quickly, for he is too easily deceived. She only trusts the one who doubts her, the one who sees through her games, the one who makes her earn each glance like a sacrament. You do not chase her, you do not save her, you stand still, and because of that, she believes you must be worth chasing, because in her world, stillness is power, and power is love. So she gives more. She tells you her secrets, not to be known, but to see if you flinch. She tests your gaze with horror, hoping it will remain unmoved. She wants you to survive her shadow. She wants you to stand over her shame and not offer comfort, only clarity. She wants to kneel before something that cannot be shaken. So she kneels before you. She builds an altar from her own humiliation. She offers it like proof. See, she says, I can bleed. As if pain were virtue, as if suffering were currency, as if she could pay her way into your soul through the rituals of self-erasure. But you do not enter. You watch from the threshold. Not cruel, not gentle, just there, present, untouched. And in that untouchedness, you become the center of her gravity. She fasts from attention, hoping to be fed. She starves herself of dignity, hoping to be seen. But you remain full, silent, alive without her. And this, to her, is sacred. She cannot worship what she controls. She cannot crave what she owns. So she makes you God because you will not be man. And in that deification, she begins to forget herself. She no longer knows where the altar ends and the body begins. She paints her lips to look unkissable. She speaks with a voice she hopes sounds broken. Not to seduce, but to prove worthiness. To prove that she, too, is carrying a cross. She wants you to see her wounds and feel devotion. But you do not. You see her wounds and remain, just remain, without bending, without kissing the place that bleeds. And she calls this cruelty, but she keeps kneeling. She kneels not because she is weak, but because she believes only in what resists her. She's known too many men who broke, who cried, who begged. Their love turned to vinegar in her mouth. She wants steel, she wants stone, she wants something she cannot touch because only then does she believe it is real. So she gives more. She abandons her pride. She forgets the sound of her own laughter. She becomes shadow, silence, and smoke, all to please the fire she cannot extinguish. And still you do not reach. You do not take. You do not break. You simply remain what you are, the man who sees her but does not fold, the one who listens but does not flinch, the one who watches her build the altar and does not place himself upon it. She begins to believe this is love, not joy, not tenderness, but gravity, the aching pull towards someone who will not be moved. She confuses your restraint for depth, your distance for destiny, your silence for fate, because she has never known love without struggle. She has never met God without violence. And you are her final temple. She will betray herself for you and call it loyalty. She will endure your indifference and call it devotion. She will abandon everything soft in her and call it transcendence. Because you never flinch, because you never kneel, because you are the altar she built from her own flesh, and she believes that if you finally speak, if you finally bless her, if you finally bend, it will all have meant something. But you do not, and she does not see the truth buried beneath your silence that you are not resisting her. You are resisting yourself. Because you, too, were once the boy who knelt at altars you could not name, burning your own hunger in the hope of being chosen. You were taught that to desire her was to become weak, and so you exiled desire. You turned it into stone. You let it rot beneath your discipline until it became something she would kneel before but never truly know. She kneels for the god but worships the wound, and the wound is mutual. For every woman who builds an altar from her pain, there is a man who builds a mask from his restraint. You do not touch her, not because you are untouchable, but because your hands have forgotten how to tremble. You do not speak, not because you have nothing to say, but because your voice long ago leaned to bury its own longing in the graveyard of dominance. She believes you are strong, but you are merely hardened, and in this mutual blindness, the ritual continues. She offers suffering, you offer distance. She bleeds, you withhold. She calls it love, you call it nothing, but still the altar grows, and no one walks away. You are not her liberator, you are the reflection of her myth. And she is the test of your illusion. You both perform, you both ache, you both kneel, just not in the same place. You kneel to the altar of control, she kneels to the altar of sacrifice, and both of you wait for the other to confess. But no one speaks, no one bends, because if she speaks, she loses the god. And if you bend, you lose the mirror. So you remain statues in a burning temple, watching the roof collapse. And that, perhaps, is the most honest thing either of you has ever done. Her loyalty is not to love, it is to the pain that made her feel alive for the first time. You wonder why she won't leave, why the door remains open but her feet stay nailed to the threshold, why she breathes your silence like oxygen, why she wears your absence like a necklace, heavy and gleaming and suffocating. It is not because you offer her love, it is because you do not. You are the echo chamber of her oldest wound, and she has mistaken the scream it produces for music. You do not hold her, and that, for her, is holy. She does not crave affection. She craves the ritual of rejection, because it reminds her that she exists. And in your presence, stripped of comfort, stripped of validation, she feels, at last, like someone real. You give her nothing, and she builds meaning from the void. You say nothing, and she writes scriptures from your silences. You touch no part of her soul, and she calls it divine, because what hurts is what lasts. What withdraws is what she remembers. What breaks her is what she kneels before. You do not see her pain as proof, but she does. Because once, long ago, pain was the only language the world took seriously. She learned that to suffer was to be acknowledged, and now she confuses suffering with truth. She does not need to be loved. She needs to bleed beautifully, and you are the blade that never strikes but always gleams. You are not her comfort, you are her meaning, and meaning, for her, was never gentle. Meaning was earned with bruises. Meaning came wrapped in shame. Meaning tasted like power and smelled like fear. So she binds herself to you, not because of who you are, but because of what you do not give. She calls this loyalty, but it is something darker, something ancient, something buried in the spinal cord of the girl who was once told to smile through the slap, to say thank you when ignored, to love the one who punished her most ruthlessly. You do not punish her not with violence, not with cruelty. You simply do not bend. You let her break against you, and she calls that justice. And somewhere beneath the surface, so do you. She keeps returning to the place she was shattered because it is the only place she ever felt whole. She traces the outline of your indifference like scripture. She wears her humiliation as armor, not because it protects her, but because it proves she has survived something worth kneeling for. She does not want to be saved. She wants to be shattered again, because in the shattering, she feels real. Because in the pain, she feels chosen. Because in your silence, she sees the possibility of victory that may be this time. If she gives more, if she breaks more, if she becomes nothing, you will at last crown her with the softness she dreams of. And until then, she worships the ache. She wears it like royalty. This is not madness. This is memory. You remind her of the first man who didn't choose her, not because she lacked beauty, but because he lacked hunger. You remind her of the first mirror that refused to reflect her worth. And she has been trying to convince that mirror ever since. You are not a man to her. You are a wound that never closes. And like all sacred wounds, it becomes a crown. You see the shift, the transformation. She no longer tries to seduce you. She begins to seduce her own pain. She becomes addicted to the theater. She walks with a limp that isn't there. She crafts a voice out of sorrow. Her beauty becomes sculpted not by joy, but by the careful architecture of suffering. She learns how to cry without tears, how to ask without speaking, how to kneel and look regal doing it. Her agony becomes her throne, and from that throne, she waits not for love, but for recognition. She no longer wants you to love her. She wants you to see the empire she built from her ache. And you do, but you do not speak, because you know what she does not, that if you crowned her, the illusion would die. If you kissed her brow and whispered enough, she would vanish. Because she is not in love with you, she is in love with the hunger you refuse to feed. You are the fire she dances around, never to be touched, never to be claimed, only to be used as proof that she is still burning. She needs to suffer beautifully, and you allow it not because you enjoy it, but because you see the structure of her need and refuse to lie to it. You know she does not want freedom. She wants to be haunted. She wants to feel the ghost of you pressed against her throat, not strangling, just reminding her that breath still means something. And maybe, deep down, you want to be her ghost. Maybe you, too, were never seen. Maybe your silence is a shield you forged long ago, after you offered your soul to someone who laughed. Maybe you stopped speaking because you once cried, and no one came. Maybe this entire performance the unbending altar, is just your own crown of thorns, worn backwards. So the two of you continue. She kneels, you remain. She bleeds, you watch. She crowns herself with pain, and you say nothing. Not because you are cruel, but because you cannot offer her the lie she wants. Because you know that to love her truly would be to strip her of the only identity she's ever built, the girl who stays through pain, the woman who turns rejection into redemption, the queen of the wound. And if you took that away, who would she be? So you let her ache, you let her stay, you become the fixed star around which she orbits in self-destruction. And maybe you love her too. But your love is not made of comfort. Your love is the kind that refuses to interrupt someone's myth. Your love is the kind that watches the fire burn and says, "This is who you are now." And she accepts it. She turns her pain into poetry. She turns your silence into scripture. She walks through the world like a saint, carrying a secret that somewhere there is a man who did not love her, and that made her holy. She does not cry for you anymore. She cries for the girl who thought love meant rescue. That girl is dead, and in her place stands a woman crowned in agony, loyal not to joy, but to the man who showed her how far she could fall without dying. You gave her nothing, and in that nothing, she built a kingdom of loyalty, grief, ritual, and restraint. and she rules it proudly, never looking back, never asking for softness, never needing your arms, only your distance, only your silence, only your refusal to collapse. Because that, to her, is the only love that ever felt real. And maybe, in some brutal corner of your soul, you agree. She will not return tomorrow, but she will never leave. You will not speak her name, but it will rot sweetly on the underside of your silence. Somewhere in the blackness between absence and myth, she kneels not to be chosen, but to remember that she once was not. You, the mirror with no reflection, she, the flame with no warmth, and between you, the altar, still smoking. No vows, no forgiveness, just the ghost of a crown, still hot with blood, resting on a head bowed so long it forgot the sky. You walk away, she stays, but it is the same motion, two rituals, one wound. And neither of you asks what if the crown was never meant to be worn, because even gods grow addicted to the silence that worship leaves behind.